The Filtex Corporation began in 1938 manufacturing a tank-type vacuum cleaner very similar to the Electrolux tank unit. The Filtex machines have a unique design and actually in some ways are a little bit better engineered than the contemporary Electrolux machines. And within 20 years of starting the business, in addition to their tank-type vacuum cleaner, they developed a built-in vacuum cleaner, which they called the Perma-Vac, and that went through several design revisions. Eventually, they kept on with the built-in vacuums that by that point looked more like this, and they ceased production of portable vacuum cleaners entirely. And I think it's a fun little story from what I know about it. And I thought I'd share it with you because I do now have several examples of these portable Filtex machines. This is the earliest one. So the company was started in 1938. I don't know if this one is just before World War II when American manufacturers were still able to make something like this before they entered the war, or if this would have been shortly after the war, like in the late 40s. It could be either one. It's kind of hard to tell. But this to me is just a beautiful unit. The intake on the front there. And the body is fiberboard on this. So it's light and thin. And the ends are actually held in place by this bumper, which is not all that tight, so you can see you can actually move these. But inside here is a cloth bag, very similar to the Electrolux of the time, which did not have a paper bag until the early 50s. I know on the later Filtex canisters you could get a paper bag that would go in here. I don't know if this one would have had that. I don't think anybody had a paper bag until the airway patents ran out. That would have been in the late 30s, early 40s. Very nice little exhaust door here, spring loaded. And 3 bumpers so that you could stand the thing on end. This is your power switch here. Unlike the Electrolux of the time, which was still using runners, this had wheels. These wheels have seen better days. And it could also stand on its end. So several things were kind of better thought out. Also, the lid hinges down instead of removing entirely. There is a place to wrap the cord along the bottom like this. Some of these things would have made a Filtex perhaps a better choice. I don't know where they were positioned price-wise compared to Electrolux, but it's a very fine machine. And the next design, the more common design, would have been this guy here. Without knowing for sure, I'm going to say this is early 60s. And this, again, you have a polished aluminum front cover with a latch that you can get the bag out. Change filter every 6 months, and I'm assuming that they are referring to that. Because as the name gives away, they were big on the fact that these vacuum cleaners filtered so well for their time. On the back here, we've got a little bit simplified stamped sheet steel exhaust opening. So when this is in place, the exhaust is diffused through the vents on the sides. When you take it out, you can put the hose in here and use it as a blower. And your power switch is there. One of the attachments these machines came with was a demother. Moth control was a big deal when everybody was wearing natural fibers, and most every vacuum cleaner had included, or at least had the option for, some kind of a gizmo that you could put moth crystals, paradichlorobenzene, into, and then you would, oh, I'm trying to get to the part where you actually open this up to fill it. Well, anyway, you can, here we go. Okay, so inside here it's just a passage with holes in either end so that the air blows through the crystals without actually dispensing them. And you would stick this in the exhaust after filling it and closing it back up. You'd stick the vacuum hose into this end, and then you could use that paradichlorobenzene laden air to demoth your garments. But aside from that and some other attachments like a spray gun that you could get, the Filtex attachments, which I'm sure you're familiar from their built-in vacuums, looked like this. All very, very well designed, and some of my favorites. At the time when these machines were made, you would have gotten a rug tool that could accept a pad, felt pad. This was more for polishing the floor than for cleaning. In the manual it says that this, because it's sucking down to the floor, provides the equivalent of 27 pounds of pressure and lets you wax your floor without as much personal effort putting into it. So this will have these two attachments for that. This is a later one. They did away with those. By this time it was just for a built-in vacuum, but even the built-in vacuums into the early 70s still had the felt pad that you could attach. And this rug tool, which is called the Rolex carpet tool, R-O-L-L-E-X, when you push it back and forth, this moves forward and back. Not only is it combing and then releasing what the combs have picked up, but it's also opening and closing an air passage, because this wall here is recessed from the face of the tool, meaning that if this is opened up, air can flow through here, through the carpet pile, and pick up debris on the surface of the carpet. And then when this is this way, when you're pulling it back, the air is blocked off and is forced to flow through the carpet pile, in theory deep cleaning the carpet. And they do that on the pull stroke so that the thing is easier to push, because you have that relief vent. But all very nice quality. It does have a pivoting neck. Some of these get a little bit crunchy over the years, but this one still sounds very smooth. It's almost like there's grease in there. Beautiful bare floor brush, also with the Filtex logo. Natural bristle, and they made a big deal. See the little gaps between the bristles in the front? They made a big deal out of the engineered dust vents, they called them, to enable the suction to flow in from along the edge or in the corners. And then it's all concentrated in this small opening, which provides really high velocity. So even on a lower performing unit like a portable or a small central, this brush works really well. It'll pick up things that some modern floor brush designs won't. And a beautiful little upholstery tool with air vents molded in. Your dusting brush was just a tan rubber thing with natural bristle, horsehair. Good design, but by now these are all pretty dry rotted. And the crevice tool that you would get, at least with some of them, had what looks to me like a Lincoln logo on it. Never seen that used anywhere else, and that doesn't appear anywhere else in the Filtex trade dress. So interesting. Nice tool. They also were big on the attachment holder caddy that you commonly associate with built-in vacuums. Their portables had these too. At some point, Filtex partnered with a company called Mdeco. I don't know how you say it, but I believe this was a kind of a direct selling agency similar to, let's say, Amway. And this would have been a later machine. It is a little bit shorter than the old Filtex. older Filtex. Uh, Shares many of the same components. It does have a somewhat more powerful motor. For this one, I have the hose, which is not original, obviously, but the ends are original. The other ones, the hoses are missing, and so that affects one's ability to use them, but I still appreciate the aesthetics. So that's quite powerful. That's a very strong vacuum. And no paper bag, but by this time they definitely would have had a paper liner bag that you could put in there. And we have some literature. Before we go into their transition to built-in vacuums, I'd like to share some of this literature, which is on loan from my good friend Evan in Pittsburgh. So Filtex was headed up by Mrs. Emmy Hoppe, and a female-owned company was quite a thing at the time, and a big deal was made about this machine having been designed by a woman. It was very well designed. Protect your children. Use Filtex glycol. When your sick daughter is sleeping in bed, put your vacuum on the nightstand and run it for her. That'll make her feel better. Very thoughtful. The Wonder Dusting Brush. You know, that's a little bit of a... The Wonder Brush is some pretty heavy-handed marketing, but if it gets people to use the dusting brush, because most people don't, then that's a good thing. You always have people that just use the heck out of it, and they actually have to buy replacement dusting brushes, but most of the time, when I'll look in a 40-year-old attachment caddy, the dusting brush is only dry rotted and not worn. Cleaning your pets. Dogs, cats, and horses like to be groomed. Okay. Okay, so this would have been from... This is a combined manual for both their built-in vacuum and their portable. And this goes into the early Perma-Vac machines like this one that you could use as a blower by attaching the hose. They had what was an inlet valve, but it was on the blower part of the motor. And this goes through all the same attachment suggestions. Demothing, spraying. This was back when you had to wax your floors. See, there's that disposable paper bag that goes inside the cloth bag. There's your attachment caddy. This is a duplicate of that because I get to keep one of these. So by the late 50s or early 60s, this particular machine is from 1960. Filtex had developed a built-in vacuum. And before they used the name Perma-Vac, it was just called the Filtex Central Vacuum System. And you can see, interestingly enough, this logo is the same as that machine. So this could be a 1950s machine. And that would make sense if this is also from the mid to late 50s. Maybe they didn't start using the more cursive script Filtex logo till the late 50s, early 60s. To eliminate smoke, foul odors, etc., prop open inlet and run machine. I've seen that as a selling point in more than one vintage brochure. Glycol. Science has proven that glycol in the air will kill germs and cut down sickness. You betcha. Perma-Vac. This will be a little bit later. There's another message from Mrs. Emmy Hoppe. This is interesting. One owner in a well-known desert resort community requested Perma-Vac service due to lack of suction. The dust bag and all lines throughout the house were completely filled with sand and dust. The dust bag had never been empty. Somebody was vacuuming for a very long time with very little power. How to unclog the hose. Secure a sturdy piece of wire a little over half the length of the hose. If the hose received an accidental hole, it can be patched with electrical tape. Small children are fascinated by the suction power of the Perma-Vac. They particularly enjoy shoving different items into the inlets. This should be discouraged as these items can clog the line. Later Filtex manuals said, protect your cleaning tubes. Upholstery brush, hat, drapes, poodle. Most pets like its soothing effects. Okay. Oh, and this was interesting too. Any manufacturer selling a straight suction vacuum cleaner of any kind always went out of their way to say without use of harmful brush to sell against vacuums that had a rotating brush. This is really interesting. And my Perma-Vac here came with this. See this hose? They have a hose that's designed to hook into the blower and then hook into the piping network to allow you to, I'm assuming, either force clogs out of the pipes, but also to operate the demother and the spray gun from the wall inlets. That's crazy. Not a very powerful unit. They did make a dual motor design, but this one only has 70 inches water lift, 90 CFM, 600 watts. It's basically just the portable vac. In fact, I bet you one of these is more than 600 watts. $810. I bet you the earlier ones are probably 600, so it's probably the bypass version of the same motor. But they did good cross-selling. In the Perma-Vac brochure, they mentioned the tank cleaner. In the tank brochure, they mentioned the Perma-Vac. And they did offer these machines both with and without low voltage controls. So now let's look at the machine itself. This is from the time period when they were using the Perma-Vac name along with Filtex, which I think is pretty cool. Central Vac International, I believe, was already a concern in Los Angeles by that time, so they needed a name that didn't use their name. This machine is from 1960, as I mentioned. It is serial number 316. It had been retrofitted into a house in the north suburbs of Chicago, and the inlets would have been installed through the floor, straight through, and then these tube adapters connected to this very brittle ABS piping. And here's your, whoops. And then the final filter in this machine is underneath here, which it's a struggle to get it back in, so I hope I can. but cute little house made of that flocked filter material that they always used, which works really well as long as there's enough surface area and you're not, drawing through a small opening of it, because then it takes only a teaspoon of dust to block it off. Oh, that wasn't so bad. Okay. This uses a latching relay circuit, actually utilizing the latching relay lighting control systems that were common at the time. These transverters were used for touch plates, where you could control your lights from multiple points in the house, early home automation. And this machine used that, and you would get a push button right on the canister as well as push buttons at the wall inlets. And one thing that sets this machine apart from any other Filtex that I've seen is that if you look at the wall end of the hose, I don't have the long hose here, but it would have come with an end just like this. See how it has a bayonet twist lock fitting? Well, on the inside of, I can't really see. Maybe you can see from one of these inlets. On the inside of the inlets on the machine, and even the wall inlets, there's a little bump that is not found on the later versions of these inlets. So you'd stick the hose in and twist it a little bit to lock it, and it has these very nice metal hose ends instead of the later vinyl cuffs. But this is the reverse airflow hose. So what you would do, of course, to use the vacuum as a blower just in the garage, you just stick the long hose in and you do that, and the other end you do what you're going to do with it. But this hose allows the air to flow through the pipes by connecting it up here. So that now by going to the other end, whatever area you want to do your blowing job, you would connect the long hose into the wall inlet in that room, and that lock would hold it in. And of course you'd get a little bit of leakage through all the other wall inlets, and this also does not seal very well, so it's just not a good design, which is why they got rid of it. But interesting, the thought that was put into making this machine do everything that their portable vacuums would do, including the blower function. It's also neat to note the number of parts that were shared between the tank units, particularly these lid clamps are the same as on here. Nice design. So 1960, and at that point in the early 60s, they did make a dual motor version of this. I've seen a total of one in the wild. Someday I'll trade that in. It just had a second motor sitting here. They were in series. And in 1966, this machine was available, and this is the second one of these that I've seen in the wild. This has a larger single motor, 7.2 inch. It's a 115334. It still does have the latching relay control, and it's all internal. Everything is in, it looks much like a later design Filtex unit. And also, funny enough, they went from Filtex Perma-Vac to Perma-Vac by Filtex. And this machine is serial number 5. So these are my earliest Filtex machines, and they're not nearly as common as the later ones, which Filtex was picked up by a company called Central Vacuum Inc. on Division Street in Chicago. And the proprietor, Nick Stanitz, was the national sales manager of Filtex. Not then, but then. And he sold a ton of them in the Chicagoland area. So by the late 60s, this machine looked like this. These two actually use the same motor, and I believe they're the same. It's actually, these all three might be the same model. So this is a model S300 with a single 5.7-inch motor on the outside. And this is a model S300L. Okay. And then this is also a model S300L. And this one is the 87th. And I just don't know if that's like they built a bunch of these and then starting at number whatever, they started building them this way, but that's what the serial numbers say. And there are no date codes built into these. I'm not sure of what the 2 digits at the beginning mean. They don't mean anything to me that I can see. So the way you can date these machines is either on the motor or more commonly on the relay. There will be a little stamped date code. This one is from 1967. And then finally we have the more common two-motor design, which is a TS300L, Twin Special. You can tell these are really early because on almost all of them, the control boxes are painted the same blue as the canister. But on these it is silver, and this machine is from 68. This actually came out of a house here in Oak Brook. And this one is 66-441. And that's another curious thing. They did change from S300 to S300L. And this is the more common scheme. LR means latching relay. And the L machines were usually automatic inlets where they just turned on when you open them. And they're wired like a modern central vac, but these have the latching relay. Another interesting thing about this particular TS300, being the earliest TS300 that I've come in contact with, is this diameter is the size of the wall end cuff of the hose. And you can see there's also a provision for some kind of a something to slide in here, like a little gate, to block off the exhaust from coming out of here so that it would come out the hose end. Because none of the Filtex machines made after this advertised the ability to use as a blower. And you can't use these as a blower because the exhaust is just the 2-inch opening from the motor, being, of course, a tangential discharge motor. So anyway, hope you like my little in-depth review of the Filtex portable and early central vacuums.